Sorry, internet connection problems. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome po to the Stop COVID Deaths webinar series brought to you by the University of the Philippines. Thank you for being part of our credible online community. We are now in our 124th episode. Episode 124 na po, no? And to all those who have just discovered us for today, welcome po. At sana po marami po kayo matutunan sa ating pong topic for today. For months now, the Omicron variant has been the most dominant COVID-19 variant in the world, with surges in cases on almost every continent. May mga new variants na po na nagsilabasan. Ito po yung XBB and BQ.1.1, both subvariants of Omicron. Ito pong mga bagong Omicron subvariants, they have been associated with significant immune escape and antibody evasion and are now causes of concern. Kaya po ngayon patuloy pong minomonitor ang mga hospital admissions as well as yung mga kaso po sa intensive care unit. So sana po lahat po tayo ay makinig at marami po tayong matutunan sa ating webinar for today. I'm Dr. Raymond Francis Sarmiento, Director of the National Telehealth Center, National Institutes of Health, University of Philippines, Manila. Always a pleasure to be with all of you during our regular Friday, and always looking forward to Fridays because I get to share hosting duties with our adjunct research faculty at the National Telehealth Center. Also, international renowned public health communications expert, Dr. Susie Pineda Mercado. Dr. Susie.
Hi, Raymond. Good afternoon. Magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat. Saan man kayo naroon, we're glad that you're here with us this afternoon. We've got a great topic. Pag-uusapan natin itong mga, as Raymond said, mga bagong variant na lumabas, no? So I'd like to greet all of you who are on the Zoom, and for those of you who are on Facebook Live and on YouTube. And I'd also like to greet all of you who are watching on the playback. We've got two great speakers today, two outstanding clinicians, one from the United States, Dr. Franco Felizarta, and Dr. Anna Ong-Lim from the Philippines, Pediatric Infectious Disease Specialist. So we will talk about these variants. And as you know, we're not just talking about COVID, we also talk about other outbreaks, infections, viruses, and even disasters. But for today, we are going to focus on COVID. So stay with us. Marami po tayong matututunan sa ating webinar today. And, you know, we know that you are very keen on learning about the latest news updates, both here and abroad. And it's for this purpose that we bring you the news update.
Okay, for our first news update, kamakailan po, nagkaroon po ng third meeting of the International Health Regulations Emergency Committee regarding the multi-country outbreak of monkeypox. Long story short, ito pong monkeypox ay tinatrato pa rin po nating public health emergency of international concern that is based on the International Health Regulations 2005 criteria. So everyone is encouraged po talaga to keep a vigilant mindset and an eye out po for all of these cases in particular, as this remains a cause for concern, and we hope this is something that moves away.
Hey, I think I lost you, Raymond. Okay, so for those of you who have diabetes, metabolic syndrome, pre-diabetes, or are overweight or obese, we have some news. Exercising late in the day may reduce insulin resistance and control blood sugar. So researchers in Europe studied middle-aged participants from the Netherlands epidemiology obesity study and examined fat liver content and insulin resistance in conjunction with the timing of physical activity. They found that while exercising in the morning did not reduce insulin resistance, it seems that exercising in the afternoon or evening would be beneficial. And that's our news for today. Next week, we'll bring you back some snippets and news updates so that we will all be better informed of the latest developments. Okay, and we are back. We have very interesting topic today. And of course, we are still concerned about COVID, maybe not as concerned as we used to be, but do we have to be more concerned about the variants? And we've got great speakers today. We try to bring you the best speakers we possibly can. Aside from that, we also bring you the voices of the people on the street. So Raymond, let's introduce our next segment.
Thank you, Dr. Susie. So for our next segment po, lalo na po for those who are joining us for the very first time, we try to take the pulse of the common folks on the street and we put them in a video that we prepare and call as a person on the street video po. For today's question that we have posed to our interviewees, ano po ang nababalitaan ninyo sa mga patungkol pa sa bagong Omicron subvariants na kumakalat ngayon sa iba't ibang bansa? Please watch this.
To be honest, I'm not familiar anymore with the new variants.
Natakot, syempre. Di ba yung news, parang huli kasi siyang napunta sa bansa natin.
Wala akong alam doon sa mga ano na yun sa Omicron na yan. Basta ang kailangan lang talaga mag-ingat lang.
Actually, after a year or two, medyo hindi na rin ako alam sa mga bagong variant na lumalabas kasi
meron naman po. Sa napapanahon po ngayon, kadalasan po talaga na marami na pong mga sakit ang nalalaganap ngayon sa atin.
I don't recall the variants. Parang yung una, yung wala pang vaccine. Tapos yung pangalawa, yung Omicron na ata yun. And yung pangalawa, same ata.
wala, parang hindi na rin sa akin pumapasok. Parang hindi kasi siya nabibigyan masyadong importance siguro. Hindi ko masyado siya nakikita, lalo na sa social media since doon lagi ako nakatingin, doon lagi ako nagsistay. So, for now, parang as of now, wala akong idea sa mga bagong variants ng COVID-19.
So, ayan.
Opo, nitong lang, July, kung tama yung Omicron na po na variant. Nilagnat ako, tapos diarrhea, pagsusuka din. Yun yung symptoms.
Yes, nagka-COVID na before. It was last year of April or May.
Nabalitaan ko nga kumakalat ang bagong Omicron na variant.
Parang I don't think they're airing the new variants anymore. Like, it's not that, parang hindi na siya masyadong bibigyang importance.
Actually, after a year or two, medyo hindi na rin ako alam sa mga bagong variant na lumalabas kasi wala, parang hindi na rin sa akin pumapasok. Parang hindi kasi siya nabibigyan masyadong importance siguro. Hindi ko masyado siya nakikita, lalo na sa social media since doon lagi ako nakatingin, doon lagi ako nagsistay. So, for now, parang as of now, wala akong idea sa mga bagong variants ng COVID.
Social media, bilang lahat po ng mga tao ngayon ay nakatutok sa social media, doon talaga ang parang best way to announce or remind ang mga tao tungkol sa something big tulad ng may bagong variant na naman yung COVID.
Siyempre, sobrang malaki yung advantage ng mga news sa napapanahon ngayon.
Personally, bilang hindi ko pa alam yung information na to, siguro hindi pa siya ganun ka-effective para sa mga tao. Ayun.
Ang pinakaano ko lang sa government, dapat wag nilang tanggalin ang pag-aalis ng mask hangga't may variant na kumakalat. Dapat panatilihin pa rin ang paglalagay ng mask sa bata o matanda.
So for me, I think putting someone very competent sa DOH kung saan talagang matitignan niya, ma-analyze niya at papalaganap niya yung tamang information regarding COVID-19. At the same time, someone who is hindi siya biased sa government kung sino nakaupo, kundi biased siya towards the people, towards sa mga needs ng people talaga, towards sa mga pangangailangan talaga ng bawat mamamayan dito sa Pilipinas.
Okay, thank you so much, TVUP. Always great to hear what people know or don't know. Sounds like many have not heard about the new variants, and that's okay. That's good. So we will learn more. We will all learn together a little bit more about the Omicron subvariant. So Raymond, I think you've got some housekeeping.
A little bit of housekeeping po, no? For those who have not received any of their webinar certificates, at least for webinars 1 to 122, please let us know by emailing us at stopcovid@up.edu.ph. We have already completed 100% yung pong mga should have received their certificates. So if not, please let us know. Yung pong makakatanggap lang po ng certificate are those who have attended at least 50% of the webinar duration. For webinar 123, which is last week, unti-unti po namin siyang tinatapos and hopefully ma-send po namin lahat-lahat iyon over the weekend po. Over to you, Dr. Susie.
Okay, so I think, well, for me, Raymond, no, yung topic natin today, I first heard about XBB because of some friends who were in Singapore and Hong Kong. Na yun na yung dominant strain ngayon sa kanila, no? Pero I think for us here in the Philippines, we still have a lot that we need to learn about this. I think in the US, it's BQ.1.1 or BQ.1. So marami pa tayong kailangan malaman, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to ask questions also. So you've got the Q&A box open there. Pwede na kayong magtanong ngayon. And for our format, Raymond, what's our plan today?
Well, we usually have our standard panel discussion format, Dr. Susie. Our speakers will be presenting. We have a Q&A session that follows wherein we'll be entertaining questions, not just coming in from the Zoom, pero pati rin po sa Facebook and sa YouTube. So we hope you'll be able to come up with those interesting questions. If you already have one, please try to put them already in the chat box or in the comment section of Facebook and YouTube. But before that, we will go ahead po muna with our fun quiz segment. And here is our cute introduction video.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Kumusta na kayo lahat?
Hi, I'm Doc Susie, the mini Doc Susie.
And I'm Doc Radar, the mini Doc Raymond. Are you ready to have fun? Simply open your browser to www.slido.com and enter your code to participate. We will discuss your answers during the panel discussion later on in the program.
We will have it flashing on your screen in a bit, and we look forward to your answers. Masaya at madali lang ito. Join na!
Okay.
Pwedeng pang
Maraming salamat po.
TikTok
We
yung
also
gano'n
have it
eh.
in
Yung
the Zoom.
gumaganon, Raymond eh, no? Dun sa, anong tawag nito yung sa saranggola. Alam ko na, Raymond, kung ba't parang malumanay ka. Kasi
Bakit,
parang you're whispering.
Mm.
You're speaking very quietly, so malumanay ka na naman ngayon. Sige na, punta na tayo sa conference. Go, go, go.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Susie, and thank you to TVUP for preparing those cute introduction videos po, no? For those who are joining us outside of the Zoom, YouTube, at saka Facebook po, no? Please open up your browsers and type in slido.com, and when you are prompted, enter the code 5405717. That's 5405717 for you to be able to participate dito po sa ating fun quiz. Meron po tayong 2 katanungan para dito po sa ating fun quiz. For the first question, in comparison with the Delta variant, is there evidence that the new Omicron subvariants are more? Option A, infectious. Option B, virulent. Or option C, infectious and virulent. So para pong lahat po na nabanggit. Okay? So we'd like to greet those who are joining us for the very first time daw po, no? Lalo na po yung mga nag-join us na mga talagang masugid na tagapagsubaybay po, lalo na from Quezon City, those who are joining us all the way from Lorma Medical Center, San Fernando, La Union, the University of Rizal System, Tanay Rizal, maraming salamat po. Eleuterio T. Decena Memorial Hospital in Hinobaan, Negros Occidental. Thank you. J.R. Borja General Hospital, Cagayan de Oro in Misamis Oriental, and Adventist Medical Center, Valencia City in Bukidnon. There are those also, lalo na po, ang Otorhinolaryngology Head and Neck Surgery Endoscopy Unit and the Center for Kidney Diseases of the University of Santo Tomas Hospital. Thank you. From Taguig City and Occidental Mindoro. Zamboanga City, UP Diliman, from Ilocos Region Medical Center po, Region 1, from Ward 1 Medicine in UP PGH, and Santa Rosa City Health Office COVID Laboratory, Car Sigma District Hospital in GMA Cavite. Maraming salamat po. Buenos dias din sa mga nasa Zamboanga City and those from OCG, OVCSA, UPLB sa Los Baños. Thank you so much. Our regulars from the Department of Education in the Schools Division of Isabela, Regional Office of Tuguegarao, Region 2. Thank you so much. Pati na rin sa ating mga nanonood from the Department of Emergency Medicine in PGH, the Ecosystems Research and Development Bureau ng Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Those from Bataan, Quezon City, maraming salamat po. For our question number 2, which one is not I repeat, which one is not effective against the new Omicron subvariants? Ito po ba yung monoclonal antibodies? Ito po ba yung antivirals? Or ito po yung letter C, yung mga bakuna po natin? Hindi na po ba sila epektibo against the Omicron subvariants? Okay? So, we'll be greeting those who are joining us from Stockton, California. Thank you po. From Nagasaki University in Japan. From Chonin Hospital in Taipei City, Taiwan. Thank you po sa ating mga masugid na viewers. Penang, Malaysia. Kanto City, Vietnam, the University of Fa'il in Saudi Arabia, Geras International School in Doha, Qatar, Lunichi Ali University of Blida 2, Algeria, and the Asian American Health Initiative in Maryland in the United States. Meron din po pahabol from Barangay 84, Pasay City, New Sinai School and Colleges, and Dr. Yangas Colleges Incorporated in Bukawi, Bulacan. Thank you so much. We will not be closing our fun quiz po. No? We want to encourage more and more people to join as we move on to our webinar proper. Dr. Susie?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Raymond. And we go straight now to our speakers. Our first speaker is someone you know very well. He's a familiar face. He's our go-to when it comes to new things that are happening with the virus because he's always ahead of the curve, updated, and talaga naman, pag itong nagsalita, 2-3 beses kong pinanunood yung playback. Totoo to, Franco, na ako nagbibiro. Kasi there's so much to learn from the research that he does, and he's so just on top of the game in terms of what's happening to the virus. And because he's in the United States, he also is, what should I say, very much exposed to the latest developments in terms of medical research outside of the Philippines. So I would like to welcome infectious disease specialist and a member of the UP Medical Alumni Society in America, or UPMASA, Dr. Franco Felizarta. Franco, welcome. I know it's late, but thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Franco.
Maraming salamat din, Dr. Susie. Let me share my screen.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead, Franco.
Okay. So, magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat. Good afternoon to all of you. Today, we will talk about the new Omicron subvariants, XBB and BQ.1.1. Dapat yata palitan na yung title to Walang Katapusang Lecture on COVID. But anyway, I have about 35 slides. And hopefully we can finish this in about 20 minutes. So these are my disclosures. First we will discuss the subvariants and the associated mutations, and then its growth advantage, and then the effect on monoclonal antibodies, effect on the epidemic curves, effect on antivirals, and then lastly, we'll have a few slides on the new bivalent vaccine. This was the new approved booster vaccine in the United States. So let's start with the Omicron subvariants BQ.1.1 and XBB. So initially, the two most dominant Omicron subvariants was BA1 and BA2. Okay, so BA2 is much more dominant compared to BA1, and then later on, BA2 led to BA4 and BA5. Okay, and from BA5, BQ.1.1 developed. Okay, so this is the gene of BQ.1.1. This is the spike region of the gene, and the notable mutations are positions 346 and 460. And then we'll explain this later on. So this is the BQ.1.1. How about XBB? So from BA2, BA275 and BJ1 actually developed. And then this is a rare phenomenon initially, but it's becoming more common. We have a recombination between BJ1 and BA275, which is mixing of genes, just like recombination by influenza viruses. And so After the recombination, you have the XBB virus. So this is a recombinant virus. So you have the BQ.1.1 and the XBB virus, which are becoming the more dominant subvariants. So in terms of proportion of subvariants, BQ.1.1 is becoming dominant in the United States and Europe. So for example, in France, it's already more than 30%. I think it's now more than 50% for France. XBB is the dominant virus in Asia. So for example, Singapore, India, and Bangladesh. Bangladesh almost 100%. Now in the United States, BA5, remember, from you have BA1 and BA2 initially, and then from BA2, there's two options, BA4 and BA5. Now BA5 became more dominant than BA4. So it's still the most dominant Omicron subvariant in the United States, but it decreased from about 85% to about 50% now. And as you can see here, BQ1 and BQ.1.1 are increasing. So BQ1 is 14%, BQ.1.1 is 13%. So the two together is about 27% now. So, and as you can see, there's a trend of increasing proportion. Delta is now 0%. Okay. So let's review the variant. So initially you have the ancestral virus, right? And then it developed a mutation. This is the first mutation, D614G. So it's position 614. And then you have alpha, and then several other variants, but the most dominant was Delta. And then after Delta, you have all these Omicron subvariants. So BA1 first, and then BA2 became dominant, and then BA4, and then BA5 is now the most dominant Omicron subvariant. But as you can see, I'll talk about in the forecast later. It looks like BQ.1.1 and XBB will be the next dominant Omicron subvariants. So this is all the Omicron subvariants. This is a soup of subvariants and the associated mutations. So I mentioned BA1 and BA2. BA2 became more dominant, and then from BA2 you have BJ1 and B275, and from 275 through BM111, and then the combination of BJ1 and BM11 became XBB, which is a recombinant virus. Now there's also a XBB4, and now the latest is CH11. For BA2, BA4 and BA5 developed, and from BA5, BQ1 became an offshoot. So now, and from there you have BQ.1.1. So you have this XBB and the BQ.1.1 among the soup of or a scrabble of Omicron subvariants. Now, in this study, it shows that there's a correlation between growth advantage, and the growth advantage is a combination of immune evasion and infectiousness. There's a correlation between growth advantage and the number of key spike mutations. So for example, BA4 and 5 and 275 have three key spike mutations. And BJ1, we mentioned that from its option BA2 has 4 mutations, and it has a 20% growth advantage relative to BA5. Now, BQ1 has 5 key mutation and has a 60% growth advantage. BQ.1.1, which has 6 mutation, has 100%, 2 times higher than BA5. XBB has 8 mutations and has a 190% growth advantage, 2 times higher compared to BA5. And remember, BA5 is already very infectious. Not as infectious as measles, but this is probably, in terms of transmissibility plus immune evasion is probably as infectious as measles now. And then you have the XBB4, which has 9 mutations. We don't know the growth curve, the growth advantage yet, because this is rather new. So the more mutations in the spike regions, the higher the growth advantage, meaning a combination of immune escape and increased transmissibility. This is just showing that there are other recombinants besides XBB. There's XBC and there's other like XBA and XBB. So fortunately, some of the recombinants have less growth advantage. So it doesn't mean it's a recombinant that it has more growth advantage. Okay, so different countries will have different mix of growth. Omicron subvariants. Okay, different mix, different flavor of Omicron subvariants. So, for example, this is France. So the most dominant Omicron subvariant now is BQ.1 and BQ.1.1. Japan, BA.5 and BA.5.2 is still the most dominant Omicron subvariant. Singapore has XBB and XBB.1 as the most dominant variant. United States, as I mentioned a while ago, the BA.5 and BA.5.2 are still dominant at 50%, but the BQ.1 and BQ.1.1 is increasing. Okay. Now, this is just showing you the country for individual country forecasts, and in the forecast, they're predicting that in most countries, the most dominant Omicron subvariant by January 2023 will be BQ.1 and BQ.1.1, except for India and Singapore, where XBB and XBB.1 will be the most dominant Omicron variant. And this is just the United States, showing that about 90% of the Omicron subvariants will be BQ.1 or BQ.1.1 by January 2023. So yes, there's bad news. The growth, there's a more growth advantage with the new Omicron subvariants. But the good news here is we can now predict the Omicron subvariant that will happen, the dominance of Omicron subvariant that will happen in the near future. So it's becoming more predictable. The mutations are becoming more predictable. So we're not, we're not having any different variants now, but only subvariants of the original Omicron variant. How about the effect on monoclonal antibodies? So as you can see here, for alpha, all the monoclonal antibodies will work. With beta, delta, and gamma, only about half will work. But with the Omicron subvariants, especially the later ones, all of them are almost useless. Almost all the, even Evishield is useless now for BA.5, especially BQ.1.1. So monoclonal antibodies are now useless against the new Omicron subvariants. How about vaccines? So this is example. This is one example of CoronaVac or Sinovac, 3 doses, so two vaccines and a booster. And as you can see here, with BQ.1 and BQ.1.1, there's a significant neutralizing antibody evasion. In BQ.1.1 and XBB, XB1, there's a substantial neutralizing antibody evasion. It's almost useless, okay, with the new Omicron subvariants. How about hybrid immunity? So you have 2 shots of Sinovac plus a booster, and then you have a BA.5 breakthrough infection. Even with the hybrid immunity, there's a significant neutralizing anti-evasion with XBB, XBB1, and BQ.1.1. So even if the hybrid immunity will not be very efficacious against the new Omicron subvariants. Okay. now remember that's based on antibody titers. So the effect in the epidemic curves is decreasing protective efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines against symptomatic infection. Okay, we're talking about symptomatic infections here. So what is the underlying mechanism for this increase in immune evasion? Okay, so this is just the Omicron virus with the spike protein. This is the enlarged spike protein, and this is the receptor binding domain. So there's two mechanisms for the increased infectivity and increased immune evasion. So the spike protein has two subunits, okay, that need to separate as the virus infects the cell. So in earlier variants, they were delicately attached and frequently split too early. So in older variants, you will see intact spikes, but you will have split spikes. So there's a decrease. It's harder for them to infect cells. But some of the Omicron mutations form extra molecular bridges. You know, these are the molecular bridges between the two spike subunits S1 and S2. So the bridges keep the subunits from separating prematurely. So you'll have in the Omicron variant, you're going to have all intact spikes. So a greater number of great intact spikes make it easier for Omicron to infect more cells. Okay, so that's the first mechanism. The second mechanism is there's an alternative cell entry with the Omicron. So older variants use two receptors, the ACE2 and the TMPRSS2. Omicron needs only ACE2 to get inside the cell, making cells without TMPRSS2 available for infection. So it can infect more cells, the Omicron. How about antivirals? So we have the three main antivirals are molnupiravir, nirmatrelvir, ritonavir, and remdesivir. Okay, so what is the effect of the Omicron variants against these three antivirals? So this is a busy slide. We already mentioned all the monoclonal antibodies becoming useless. This one is remdesivir. This one is molnupiravir. As you can see, okay, this is the virus susceptibility of the drug. There's actually no significant difference between the variants, even the Omicron variants. There's no significant decrease in susceptibility for antivirals. And the same thing, this is nirmatrelvir, ritonavir, and there's no significant decrease in susceptibility. So the monoclonal antibodies are becoming useless, but the antivirals still have great efficacy. And we don't have data yet on the newest one, XBB BQ.1.1, but I don't expect the viral susceptibility of the drugs to decrease with the newer Omicron subvariants. How about, so we were talking about the protective efficacy of vaccine against symptomatic infection. How about the protective efficacy against deaths? Okay, so this is the worldwide epidemic curve for daily deaths. This is Alpha, Delta, Omicron, and this is the Omicron subvariants. As you can see here, there's a dramatic decrease in deaths, even with the advent of the new Omicron subvariants. Now for BQ.1.1 and XBB, it's too early to tell, but remember in France, the dominant Omicron subvariant now is BQ.1.1, and there's no increase in deaths. No increase in deaths in France with BQ.1.1 as the dominant Omicron subvariant. In Singapore, the dominant Omicron subvariant is XBB, and there's also no increase in deaths. So at least with those two countries, there's no increase in deaths for the newer Omicron subvariants. And almost every successive variant, there's a decrease in deaths. And especially here, there's a dramatic decrease in deaths. And this is in spite of increasing worldwide activity. So now the activity is about 90% of pre-pandemic levels. At least here in the United States, there's no more social distancing, and masking is minimal. Even CDC recommended not using masks anymore, even in hospitals. Of course, you still have to use N95 in rooms where patients are infected with COVID. But with minimal social distancing, minimal masking, you have substantial decrease in deaths. Okay. So what is the reason behind this? There's increasing levels of natural infection and or vaccination. So for example, this one is published in New England Journal of Medicine. It's showing the effectiveness of previous infection, vaccination, hybrid immunity versus symptomatic and severe infection secondary to COVID. So this A and B are for the Pfizer vaccine, and this one is for the Moderna vaccine. So mRNA-1273 is Moderna. So let's look at Moderna. This is the effectiveness of the vaccine against symptomatic infection, just symptoms, okay? Previous infection is 52%. 2 doses of vaccine, this is after several months. It's almost useless, okay? How about hybrid immunity? 2 doses plus a previous infection, 52%, almost the same as previous infection. If there's a vaccine with a booster though, it increases to 61%, better than a previous infection. But if you have a booster and a previous infection, it goes up to 80% prevention of symptomatic infection. So this is for symptomatic infection. How about deaths? Okay, severe, critical, or fatal COVID-19 due to any Omicron infection. Previous infection, 91% efficacy. 2 doses is 66%. Hybrid immunity, vaccination plus a breakthrough infection, 100%. 100% in preventing deaths. How about two doses of a vaccine plus a booster, 83%. How about 3 doses with the previous infection, 100%. So 3 doses of vaccine and hybrid immunity are still very effective in preventing severe, critical, and fatal COVID-19. Okay, if you compare it to the efficacy versus symptomatic infection, so it's still much better in preventing severe infection. Hybrid, even natural immunity is quite effective at 91%. Of course, your chance of dying from a natural infection is much higher compared to vaccination. So now, what is the explanation for this? So even if there is a substantial neutralizing antibody evasion, the T cell responses are still durable. Okay, so for example, this is the spike IgG titers after complete vaccination. 6 months, this is 6 months after complete vaccination, there's a dramatic drop in these spike antibodies. But after a booster vaccine, it increases. But remember, after 6 months, this will decrease again. But look at the interferon T cell response. After complete vaccination, and this is 6 months after, this is actually statistically not significant. So there's actually no decrease in the T cell response 6 months after. And interestingly, after a booster vaccine, it doesn't even increase. But this is still adequate cellular immunity to prevent severe infection. So yes, there's a decreased antibody levels. So there's decreased protection against symptomatic infection, but the cellular immunity is still very effective in preventing severe disease. Okay, so that's an explanation. So what is the mechanism here? Well, we talk about the alternative cell entry. We mentioned that the older variants use 2 receptors, and the Omicron only needs ACE2. Okay. Coincidentally, the upper respiratory tract are rich in ACE2, but they are not rich in TMPRSS2. So what happens is Omicron selectively infects the cells in the upper respiratory tract. So it becomes de facto an upper respiratory tract infection rather than a lower respiratory tract infection. So upper respiratory tract infection is more of common colds, rhinitis, sinusitis, and of course lower respiratory tract infection, the lungs, is more of pneumonia. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why Omicron is less virulent than Delta, because there's a higher chance of infecting the upper respiratory tract rather than the lower respiratory tract. Okay. Now, we mentioned about natural immunity being effective in preventing a second infection. So it's important to combine both natural immunity and vaccination in assessing the overall immunity of the population. So for example, in the United States, the combined vaccination and a natural infection rate is about 95%. So at least 95% of the population in the United States, this includes kids, are either vaccinated and or infected. Okay. Now, we know that there's a waning immunity with time. So for example, if you have a previous infection within 3 months, it's 90% effective in preventing symptomatic infection, but it's only 50% in preventing infection 6 months after. Okay, there's waning immunity with time. The same thing with vaccination. If you have a booster within 3 months, it's up to 75%, but after 6 months, it's 55%. Okay, and if you have a hybrid immunity, it's much better, from 100%, from 95% to 90%. So there's decrease in waning of the immunity when you have a hybrid immunity. But so, for example, so this is important. Okay, so I mentioned that at least in the United States, 95% are either vaccinated and or infected. But if you adjust for the waning immunity, only 75% of the population has effective immunity versus the COVID. But 75% is pretty good. So because of this, we're now in a transition between pandemic and endemic. It's becoming more endemic because of the increase in the overall immunity. That's combining vaccination and natural infection, even adjusted for waning immunity with time. So what are the possible endemic scenarios in the future? So we have the optimistic scenario, intermediate scenario, and pessimistic scenario. So this is for the United States. So now remember, COVID-related annual deaths will depend on two factors. One is the attack rate or infectiousness. This is the proportion of the population infected. And the infection fatality rate or the virulence, the proportion of people infected who will die. So in the likeliest scenario, a new dominant Omicron subvariant will probably infect 40% of the population. Influenza usually will infect only 10 to 20% of the population. Okay, so, but of course, that would be the optimistic scenario. It only infects 20%. But this is the likely scenario, 40%, because Omicron infected almost 80%, at least 80% of the population. So the new Omicron subvariants will probably infect a lower amount. Of course, the pessimistic scenario will be 80%. The infection fatality rate, the likely scenario is 0.05%. Right now it's 0.1. Oh no, sorry. Right now it's 0.5%. So we're hoping it's 10 times lower. So the annual deaths will be up to, in the likely scenario, is 100,000 per year. In the United States, influenza will kill 20 to 30,000 per year. So this one is 3 to 5 times higher than influenza. So it looks like a very bad influenza season. Okay, and that's the likely scenario. The optimistic scenario is equivalent to an influenza season. Now, this is the annual deaths across virological and immunological possibilities. So remember that the deaths will actually depend not only the viral virulence, but the population immunity, which is the combination of the natural immunity and vaccination adjusted for the waning immunity. And so, for example, if you have most of the people have boosters, okay, and or hybrid natural infection, so that a lot of them have hybrid immunity, the annual deaths will be equivalent to a influenza season, usual influenza season. But if the population immunity is quite low, okay, and the viral virulence increases, then it can be up to 300,000 deaths per year. But this is still less than 500,000 per year in 2020 and 2021. So I don't think this will happen. So the likeliest scenario, of course, will be 3 to 5 times higher than an influenza season. Of course, that before that would be unacceptable, but now, since we're talking worldwide of 5 million deaths per year, a lower number of deaths per year worldwide will be acceptable. And usually, influenza will kill about 200 to 300,000 worldwide per year. So, if COVID kills 1 million per year, that's much better than 5 million per year in 2020, 2021. I'm talking about estimated excess deaths, not the reported deaths, because the reported deaths will be much lower than the estimated excess deaths. Because remember, when we're talking about influenza deaths, we're not talking about reported deaths. We're talking about estimated excess deaths for influenza. So I have to use the same criteria. So now, these are the last two slides. So how about the new booster that was approved in the United States? It's a bivalent booster. The bivalent booster is a combination of BA.4/5 with the ancestral virus. So there's ancestral plus the Omicron subvariant. And in this study by Wang, using David Ho's laboratory, they have shown that if you compare the bivalent booster with the ancestral booster compared to natural infection and two boosters, there's really not much difference. There's minimal difference between the new booster and the old booster, okay? Now, this is based on pseudovirus. This next study is based on live virus. So this is a better study. And they have shown that for BA.5 right now is the most dominant Omicron subvariant. The bivalent booster has the antibody level is 4 times higher than the original booster. And for BQ.1.1, this is the forecast is that BQ.1.1 will become the dominant virus by January 2023. It's 10 times better than the original booster, which has the ancestral strain. Remember, the bivalent is BA.4/5 plus the ancestral virus. So, so two different conclusions. One is based on pseudovirus. This one is live virus. I think this is a better study, but we need, there were 3 other studies showing that it's about probably 1.52 times better. That's based on pseudovirus. So I think we need more studies on based on live virus just to confirm this finding that the bivalent booster is superior to the older booster. That should be it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Franco. Nako, palakpakan nga natin. Again, I'm gonna watch this again later, Franco. I really appreciate all the details that you put into the presentation, and I think it's quite reassuring. Your presentation is quite reassuring kasi sometimes when you're looking at the news, no, parang the worst variant has come out, no. But I think it's very reassuring, and I think I learned a lot, but I still want to watch it again because I feel like Teka, ulitin ko nga yun, parang maganda yatang namnamin yun. So thank you so much, Franco, and you'll see the comments, the clapping, the hearts, whatever it is that's coming out here on our screen. Okay, Raymond, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Susie, and thank you also, Dr. Franco. My favorite one is the last one on comparison of the bivalent vaccines with the ancestral
no?
vaccines. So very important po yun kasi marami po nagtatanong. I've already seen one question here in the Q&A for Zoom. So maraming salamat po. So just to remind everyone, for the Q&A session of this webinar, we will be choosing from the upvoted questions. We encourage everyone to start typing in your questions in the Zoom Q&A or in the comment section in the Stop COVID Deaths or TVUP Facebook pages or in the TVUP YouTube channel po. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our next presenter. She's a known member of the DOH Technical Advisory Group and also the professor and chief of the Division of Infectious and Tropical Diseases in Pediatrics at the Philippine General Hospital. She's one of the best communicators out there po, no? Especially for COVID-19. Please welcome again to your screens, Dr. Anna Ong-Lim. Dr. Anna.
Thank you, Raymond, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope I'm coming in clearly.
Yes, ma'am, you're
Yeah,
okay.
very clear.
You're good.
Okay, great. So I really enjoyed Dr. Franco's talk, no, and there's really so much to learn about the COVID situation and the new variants. He shared a lot of data and a lot of information from particularly from the US perspective. So siguro maganda ring magkaroon ng konteksto kung ano bang application nito sa Pilipinas, ano na ba sitwasyon natin ngayon, at ano ba ang pwede nating gawin. So that will be, or those will be the questions that I'd like to tackle for the next few minutes to supplement what Dr. Franco already shared with us, reviewing the current situation locally and thinking about how we can still harness the protection of vaccines to continue protecting ourselves. So I'm sure sinusubaybayan pa rin naman natin lahat yung mga kaso na inire-report pang-araw-araw sa atin ng Department of Health. Makikita natin dito that we have exceeded 4 million cases since we started tracking 2 years ago. But I guess the good news is that our daily numbers and the 7-day moving average have really significantly decreased since the last surge that we had early this year. So siguro yung mga COVID virgins dyan na never pang nahawaan, nito na sigurong nagsimula ang taon or particularly nitong panibagong uptick na naramdaman natin nitong July or August, hindi na rin tayo nakalagpas, hindi na tayo nakaiwas at halos marami sa atin ang nahawaan. So makikita natin dito sa lower portion ng slide where the graph is located, you will see that there has been an upsurge since the middle of this year, which we are attributing to Omicron as well as to its subvariants. Fortunately, we're blessed by the fact that kahit dumadami yung mga kaso, hindi na natin nakikita yung pagdami ng mga namamatay at naoospital. Gawa na rin siguro nung immunity na meron na sa ating population dala ng pagbabakuna at immunity from previous infections. Meron na nga ba tayong XBB at XBC dito sa Pilipinas? So Dr. Franco already explained to us the nuances of the XBB subvariant, bakit ba siya source of concern, ano ba yung pinagmulan niya. So itong mga subvariants na to generally speaking are really mutations of the circulating Omicron VOC. And dahil nga nagkakaroon pa rin ng pagkakahawaan within communities, hindi malayong mangyari na magbago yung anyo nito mga Omicron viruses natin at yun na ang pinagmumulan ng mga subvariants. Nagsimula siyang mapansin, well, nabalita in Singapore, pero nakikita na siya sa napakaraming bansa. It's at least detected in at least 24 countries. But the good news is that the increase in cases has not seemed to be paralleled by an increase in the number of deaths. So currently, ang ating assessment is that there's no evidence for more severe illness nor more severe clinical manifestations compared to the original Omicron variant. Sa Pilipinas, ginagawa pa rin natin ang whole genome sequencing sa mga samples na natatanggap ng Philippine Genome Center. So meron na po tayong tatlong sangay ng Philippine Genome Center. We have the one that's located in Quezon City. There's another one in the Visayas and also another PGC already in Mindanao. And each of these branches are capable of doing their sequencing runs and the data is collated. So as of the most recent sequencing run that was held October 15 to 17, 61 XBB variant cases were reported, with the majority coming from Western Visayas and one case coming from the Davao region. The majority have been tagged as recovered, and as of last month, 8 were still active cases. So malamang ngayon, this will also be already included in the recovered portion of the line list. This 61 new XBB variant cases make up a total of 81 mula nung nagsimula tayong magkaroon ng detections ng XBB earlier last month rather. With respect to the XBC subvariant, ito naman it's a recombinant Omicron and Delta variant. And sa ngayon, kung titignan natin ang mga global health authorities, hindi pa lahat sumasang-ayon na ito ay dapat ma-consider na variant of concern. So meron na tayong bagong category ngayon which we call variant under monitoring and investigation. Basically, sinusubaybayan pa siya para malaman kung ito ba ay dapat bigyan ng mas matinding pansin. Now sa Pilipinas, we have already had 71, or rather in the most recent sequencing run, 71 new XBC variant cases were reported coming from Soxargen, Davao, Western Visayas, and BARM. And of this group of cases, 5 were reported as deaths, with the majority tagged as recovered. In addition, on review, yung mga kaso na dating na-identify as Omicron or Delta subvariants have been reclassified as XBC. So, nung inireview yung ating mga datos, nakita na dapat pala sila ay kilalanin as XBC. So, all in all, meron na tayong 193 XBC cases detected in the country. So, kung titignan natin, actually, mas marami pa tayong XBC kaysa sa XBB. So, ano naman ngayon ang halaga nung pag-monitor nitong mga variants na ito sa Pilipinas at sa buong mundo? We actually want to keep an eye on the variants because our goal is to assess whether we can adequately protect ourselves with the current measures, including vaccines. At dahil napakalaki ng ating pakinabang sa pagbabakuna, talagang nakatutok yung pansin natin to find out whether the current vaccines are still effective. So once again, Dr. Franco already shared with us a lot of information regarding laboratory studies looking at neutralizing antibodies and T-cell responses to these new subvariants. But the idea is really quite simple. Kung titignan natin itong mga lines dito sa graph na ito, pansinin natin na syempre yung ating immunity laban sa virus, no, ay mas gumaganda kung ang ginagamit nating bakuna ay mas katulad ang circulating variants. So this red line represents a variant-based vaccine that is closely related to the circulating variant in comparison to the yellow line, which represents the impact of a vaccine that is very different from circulating variants. So, ito na rin naman ang principle na ginagamit natin para mapakinabangan ng mga bakuna na dati na nating ginagamit. Dapat mas kahawig siya ng mga types na kumakalat sa ngayon para mas mapakinabangan ng ating katawan. However, we will also see at the end of this graph that booster jabs add little protection when the population immunity is already high. Ibig sabihin, kung karamihan sa population ay immune or already immune coming from previous disease or previous vaccination, meron pa ring dagdag pakinabang pero yung kanyang agwat is very different compared to this part of the graph. So nabanggit kanina ni Dr. Franco ang dalawang endpoints na kailangan nating tutukan ng pansin, no? So when we talk about vaccine efficacy or vaccine effectiveness, hindi lang natin dapat pinagsasama, no, ang iba't ibang outcomes dahil iba-iba, no, ang bisa ng bakuna depende dun sa ating binabantayan na resulta. So you will see in this graph that the orange bar represents effectiveness against symptomatic infection and the red bar represents effectiveness against severe disease. So kung tayo ay nakatanggap lamang ng 2 dosis or ang ating primary series, hindi gaanong mabisa ang bakuna laban sa symptomatic infection. Pwedeng-pwede pa tayong mahawa. Pero kung ang pinag-uusapan ay mamamatay ka ba dahil sa COVID, sa ngayon ang ating information is that if you have been vaccinated, then you are protected against severe disease. Now, if you are boosted, hindi ka lamang protektado laban sa severe disease as you will see in this red line, no? May lamang ka pa kasi nadagdagan pa ng konti yung protection mo at meron ka pang karagdagang proteksyon laban sa symptomatic infection. So this is really the reason why we keep encouraging people to be boosted. You get not just an improvement in your protection against severe disease, but you also improve your protection against getting symptomatic infections. So this is if you use your boosters with the original sequence o yung ating ginagamit sa ngayon na mga bakuna. Now, kung gagamitin natin ang mga tinatawag na variant-based boosters, meron pang dagdag na pakinabang. Pero kung ikukumpara natin sa original sequence, sinasabi sa ngayon na halos magkatulad sila. So this is also what Dr. Franco was sharing kanina. The jury is still out. We're still observing. And for me, the take-home point is this. Kailangan ba natin maghintay ng variant-based vaccine or ng bivalent vaccines bago tayo magsabi, sige magpapabooster na ako? Dapat ang sagot dito ay magpabakuna na sa lalong madaling panahon. Kasi the protection that you get now is really quite essential. Now, ano na nga ba ang sitwasyon natin sa Pilipinas? Let's remember that when we talk about our target population, hindi natin sinasabi na yung buong 110 million Filipinos ay hinahabol nating bakunahan. In fact, very conservative ang ating target populations. Ang ating 60 and above, ang target population is about 85% of that age group. Ang 18 to 59, about 80% of the total age group is the target. And for the youngest, the pediatric age group, about 70% ang ating hinahabol. So ano na nga ba ang nakita natin in terms of vaccine coverage? Wag na muna natin sigurong bigyan ng or tutukan ito and let's instead look at yung ating proportions ng fully vaccinated which we still define as having received 2 doses. Maganda naman ang ating coverage. In fact, 94% of the target population has already been provided with vaccines. Pero siguro kailangan ko ring ipakita sa inyo na itong total na to ay aapektuhan ng dami nung nabakunahan between for the 12 to 17 at 18 to 59 age group. In fact, more than 100% nga ang nabakunahan dito sa grupong to. So siguro ito ay mga issues of reporting and recording. Pero tutukan natin itong very young population of na 5 to 11, wala pa sa kalahati ang nabibigyan natin ng bakuna. And this is really quite concerning, lalo na ngayon nagsisipagpasok na itong mga batang to at nagkaroon pa tayo ng panibagong executive order making masking optional, no, in indoor settings. Ano naman ngayon ang ating coverage for our first booster? Unfortunately, kung titignan natin ito, the total is less than 50% and you only have a range of between 11 to 30% across the different age groups. So this is quite concerning and really something that we have to keep in mind, no? Kahit sinasabi natin na gusto natin, no, ng protection, the most important vaccine booster is really the one that you actually get. Wala nang sa ngayon siguro, no, base sa ating impormasyon, kung meron na tayong bivalent boosters, then that's all well and good. Pero hindi dapat hintayin na dumating itong mga boosters na ito para mapakinabangan yung additional protection that we will get from receiving our third and our fourth doses if it's necessary. So for the last question, how do we protect ourselves? So hindi magbabago yung ating mga rekomendasyon. And in fact, tatandaan dapat natin na multiple layers always improve success. So siguro ang magandang halimbawa dito, kung tayo'y lumalabas sa panahon ng tag-ulan, no? Merong iba nagdadala lang ng payong, yung iba meron pang raincoat, yung iba pati botas dala-dala. And syempre, mas lalo kang maraming suot, mas maliit ang tsansa na ikaw ay mabasa, magkasakit, magkatrangkaso o kung anuman. Pero kung nag-iisa lang yung bit-bit mo, meron lang payong, edi pag uwi mo sa bahay, basang-basa ka pa rin, lalo na kung dumaan ka sa baha. So katulad na lang din ito, no? Yung sinasabi nilang Swiss cheese or multiple layers. Kahit na may butas, hindi perfect ang proteksyon ng bawat isang method dahil pinagpatong-patong natin ang physical distancing, hand hygiene, ventilation, vaccination, cough etiquette, and so on and so forth. Mas maliit ang tsansa na itong mga virus na nag-aantay sa kabilang dulo ay makarating sa atin at tayo'y mahawaan. So we really want to make sure that this message comes across, no? We want all of these layers in place. And we also want particularly to draw attention to the fact that we are still sorely lacking in the booster coverage and we need to work on this very, very urgently. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you so much. Oh, galing talaga. Pag nag-explain si Anna, talagang madaling maintindihan ng mga nakikinig, no? And again, you see all the comments and we'd like to thank you, Anna, for on short notice coming and putting together such an excellent presentation. So Raymond, over to you. Or over to me ba? Ako ba?
It's time for our Dr. Susie. But before that, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Anna for giving us insights from the Philippine perspective po, no, and answering key questions that people really are looking forward and being able to help out in terms of trying to understand, laymanize all of it. Maraming salamat po, Dr. Anna. So right now, we'll be asking both of our speakers to switch on their video cameras. But before that, we'll take a very quick break for our public service announcement for today.
O sige na, anak. Parang kagat lang ng langgam. Kantik o yung kumikiliti lang. Ito naman parang hindi ka pa nababakunahan dati. Akala ko pa naman brave girl ka. Nakakahiya na kay Doc.
Okay lang po, nanay. Ay, Ang cute naman ng shirt mo. Favorite color ko rin yan.
Doc, favorite ko rin po ang color nito. Pero ayoko po ng red hunting. Masakit kumagat at takot rin po ako sa blood. Magtutugo po ba ako sa bakuna?
Ah, hindi. Walang dugo sa bakuna. Konting pisil lang, tapos na.
Kakasugat ba ako, Doc?
Hindi ka magkakasugat. Lalagyan lang natin ng plaster pagkatapos para safe. Di ba nabakunahan ka na rin ng contra measles at chickenpox dati? Parang ganun lang din ang bakuna para sa COVID-19.
Natatakot pa rin ako, Doc.
Alam mo ang secret sa pagiging brave. Hindi ibig sabihin na wala kang kinatatakutan. Kundi, kahit natatakot ka, hinaharap mo pa rin ito.
Okay. Ready na po ako, Doc.
Una, pupunasan ko muna ng bulak na may alkohol ang braso mo. Okay? Tapos, mabilis lang na konting... Ayos! Tapos!
Tapos na, anak. Pwede mo nang buksan ang mga mata mo.
Nay, sabi sa inyo, brave girl na po ako eh.
O, heto ang prize para sa'yo, ha? Wow! Bagay sa shirt mo. That's the color of bravery.
Color rin yan for love. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Nay.
Dahil ako po ay mahal ninyo, nagpabakuna na ako.
Kaya mga bata, magpabakuna na kayo.
Stay safe and stay well. Mga bata, magpasama na sa Bakuna Center. Thank you so much, TVUP. The COVID Communication Public Service Announcement is one of the many creative outputs of the Stop COVID Deaths team to push for pediatric vaccination for children aged 5 and above. Please share this video clip with all of your social media accounts. Stay safe and stay well. Magpasama na po sa Bakuna Center. Dr. Susie?
Oh, Raymond, ikaw nga kasi yung boses dun eh, di ba? Boses mo ba yun? Si Raymond po yan. Nagsa-sideline po yan sa sa mga teleserye, sa mga drama. Anyway, okay, let's go. Let's have Franco and Anna open your cameras, and you'll see that the audience is still appreciating both presentations, Franco and Anna. And just to kick off the discussion, let me ask, and it's very interesting because you have two different situations, and I remember when we were talking about this, Franco, you were saying the difference between now and when we started was we're no longer looking at a naive or a virgin population, right? When this pandemic started, no human being's body understood what SARS-CoV-2 was. But now you have people who've been vaccinated, so there's some familiarity with it, or they've gotten infected. And there are evolving tools. So we've been better at testing, we're better at treatment, we're better at even at the behavioral measures. I think we're much better than when we started, diba? Kasi dati lakas ng resistance, ngayon more or less I would say there are a great number of people who understand how the disease is transmitted and how they can be saved. But you have to have both, no? You have to have the kind of herd immunity or the familiarity of the body to the virus, but also a good deployment of the tools, which I think is what Anna was saying, na yung second booster kulang pa sa Philippines, no? So let me ask a sort of like more of a thought-provoking question, Franco, and Anna also, right? What would be a variant that we should be very concerned about? Kasi it looks like this one. As long as you're vaccinated or you've gotten infected before, plus if you're boosted, no, the disease is not that, it won't kill you anymore. Parang ganun no? Hindi na tayo mamamatay. Magkakasakit tayo pero hindi natin ikamamatay. Pwera na lang kung you have no access to medical care. But so Franco, what do you think would be a kind of variant that we should be really super concerned about?
Well, initially yung recombinant between Delta and Omicron, because Delta is very virulent and then Omicron is very infectious. Pero no, like XBC. But if we look at the fitness and the growth curve, it actually didn't increase the virulence. Maybe just some increase in the growth curve. So yeah, initially that was the what you call this. We were afraid of that combination, but nung lumabas hindi naman pala ganun katindi. So well, yeah, but that could still happen in the future. Because when I was explaining the mechanism, for example, yung alternative entry. So instead of 2 receptors, they only need 1 receptor now.
Yeah.
Pero coincidentally, yung upper respiratory tract are rich in ACE2 but not TMP RSS2. So ang nangyari naging upper respiratory tract infection. So it doesn't mean that you're gonna have mutation that increases infectivity, that it will actually increase virulence too. So but I don't think that will look at influenza, the last our worst pandemic was 1918. I mean, every now and then we'll have bad influenza epidemics, but it never became 1918. So I don't think that will happen again. I mean, you'll have some probably wars. Let's say a few years from now we'll have a different variant, but I don't think it will be to the level of 2020 and 2021. So
Oo, no? Kasi nga, we've become better at understanding it, and then there is cellular immunity, no?
yeah.
I mean, I think that was...
The problem will be another virus.
Ayun.
So yeah, so it's not gonna be, so we have to, let's say Ebola virus mutates to something else, becoming more infectious. That could be a big problem, or Marburg or Nipah virus. So it's not just coronavirus. So because we already have the overall immunity against coronavirus, especially SARS-CoV-2 is already increasing. So I don't think, if you look at the epidemic curves, it's just every time there's a new variant, there's a dramatic decrease in deaths. Even with the XBB in
Right. Yeah.
Singapore and France, BQ.1, it didn't decrease. Yeah. This is with decrease in activity. I mean, increase in activity. No minimum social distancing, especially in Europe, United States. Wala nang masking eh. We don't have masking here. Sa sa healthcare centers lang meron. But even that, cloth mask against Omicron is probably almost ineffective. And then but in outside setting, it's it will not benefit you anyway, because there's dilution from the outside air. So really, N95 will still be effective, but I think the future will be ventilation. So because ventilation will work for every respiratory virus. So let's say in the future we have another respiratory virus. If we have good ventilation, good air exchange, good filtration, that would solve most of the problems in the future. So I think that's we should put more emphasis and investment on good ventilation.
Oo, kasi naging uso kasi yung, especially for hospitals, no, naging uso yung saradong-sarado. I mean, when you look at PGH, right, it's still quite open. No, parang, and I think in other countries it's like that. No, there's still a lot of fresh air that circulates. But I think, I mean, just listening to you earlier, I was thinking, not many generations of doctors get to experience a pandemic. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying that we're alive. We got through it. But as you said, right, this particular virus looks like parang pababa na siya, no? Pa-endemic na siya. But anyway, let me toss the ball to Anna. So Anna, I found your data very interesting about the targets, no? And have we met the target? So my question for you is the same thing, right? What would be a situation that we should be concerned about in relation to the variants?
I think we should be I would agree with what Franco already said about the features that would make us concerned, no? So sa ngayon, nakikita natin that the subvariants of Omicron are quite transmissible, but their virulence does not seem to equate with that of Delta. So actually, dun sa poll question kanina, di ba? Tinatanong virulence, transmissibility, or both. No, so mabuti na nga lang sa nakikita natin, transmissible nga siya, pero hindi siya sing virulent. Now, whether that's because we have population immunity coming from vaccination, previous infection, or intrinsically talagang hindi siya kasing tindi nung dating variants, hindi natin masabi kasi wala na tayong population na halos hindi na-expose eh. Pero we just take it as a blessing na mabuti na nga lang na hindi tumutumbas yung hospitalizations and deaths kahit dumadami yung kaso. Now, kung magkaroon ng variant na malalampasan, no, yung sinasabi nating immune evasion and really is able to translate that immune evasion to actual a clinical disease, then that would be really concerning. Lalo na sa sitwasyon natin sa Pilipinas na mababa na yung second booster, mababa pa rin ang first booster, no? So I hope I was able to draw attention to that. Wala pa tayong 50% ng population na naaabot ng ating first booster. So kahit sabihin natin na ay hindi naman pala kasing tindi yung mga variants na kumakalat ngayon, eh kung marami pa rin sa atin na magkakasakit, ang impact pa rin yan sa ating health system, matindi pa rin. Which is still what we're seeing, di ba? Parami pa rin yung na-ospital kasi marami pa rin nahahawaan at maaring di sila namamatay pero matindi pa rin ang tama ng sakit, na-ospital pa rin sila.
Yeah, kasi talagang kailangan humabol yung ano eh, no? Parang the science that we can use to fight it is there. Pero kung yung sistema hindi makahabol and society is not able to catch up by giving the maximum or the optimal protection, may problema pa rin, right? There's still a problem. So I really appreciated your presentation of that data. Okay, so Raymond, I think it's
just want to make a point. Yeah. So the reported infections sa Philippines about 4 million so far, right? 4 million. But if you look at the the economists in WHO seroprevalence estimates, at least 85% of the Philippine population already infected. 85%. So it means it's the United States about 55%. It means that a lot of Filipinos will probably have hybrid immunity. Kasi ang mataas ang ano nyo eh, what is your vaccination rate? You said, 80%? It's actually higher than the United States. Your vaccination rate of Philippines is higher than the United States now.
Pero Franco, you have to consider also that our targets are adjusted. Kasi it's not 100% of the population eh, di ba?
It's not 100%.
So, parang overall, if you think about it, yung target population to be vaccinated is about
2/3 now.
Mga
yeah, but still, the infection, the estimated infection rate is quite high actually, 85%. That's pretty high. So it means a lot of people will have hybrid immunity. That's why, even if your booster rate is so low, even if you have subsequent Omicron surge, yung death rate nyo is not, the excess deaths is not really increasing.
Sumasabay.
Yeah. So it means there's a lot of people already have hybrid immunity. Kasi kung ang infection rate ng Philippines is very low, and then you have a low booster rate, dapat mas mataas yung excess deaths. But you're not seeing that. And it's not just in the Philippines. We're talking about Bangladesh, India, all of that.
The world.
Low booster, but the excess death is lower than expected. So it means, I'm not sure if you already have some national zero prevalence data in the Philippines now. Yeah. So in the United States, they're
Wala
checking.
pa
Right now,
yata
it's about 60%. I think at least 60% in a few months ago, but I'm pretty sure after Omicron, it's probably 90%. Because ang problema kasi, the antigen test, house antigen test, is only 60% sensitive. Plus, if you do a PCR, by that time, it's already negative. So, first of all, there's a lot of asymptomatic infections.
Correct.
And second is there's a lot of false negative testing. And third is even if it's positive, they're not being reported because it's
Correct.
an
Correct.
antigen test.
Yes.
So it's yung ano nyo, zero ang reported infection is probably 10 to 20 times lower than the real infection rate.
And there's very limited testing also. Kasi the testing is out of pocket. Also, maraming factors. Raymond, I think it's a good time to answer our fun quiz kasi it's related to what we're just talking about now. Let's go and answer that.
Oh,
So,
sige.
Franco
Okay.
gave us these questions, but sige, go ahead, Raymond.
There was one question that I was going to ask, pero sige, let's do this muna. The
gawin
two
muna natin.
questions in comparison with the Delta variant, is there evidence that the new subvariants of Omicron are more? What's the correct answer, Dr. Franco?
Yeah, just infectious, not
Infectious. Okay. 27%
virulent.
chose infectious.
Oo.
The Zoom.
Nagpalit
Tapos
na.
dito,
Okay naman yan. Okay lang magpalit kay answer. Pero I think this is a key message, right? It's a key message for this webinar na what you're seeing is highly infectious disease but not necessarily virulent. Hindi siya what is the word? Masukal? Nahol?
masahol. Mas masahol.
Oo, parang mamaya, babalik sa akin yung salita. There's a word eh. Sige, okay. Go ahead, Raymond.
okay. Question number 2, which one is not effective against the new subvariants of Omicron, Dr. Franco?
Monoclonal antibodies.
45% ang sumagot po niyan sa Zoom, and then 42% naman po ang sumagot sa ating Slido. I'm surprised na medyo mas maraming sumagot ng vaccines, hindi na daw effective against the new subvariants. Pero okay.
Oo,
Go
kaya
ahead,
maganda yung messages eh. I found the word na Raymond and Franco and Ana. It's mabangis. Di ba?
Okay.
Diba, mas nakakahawa pero hindi mas mabangis. No? But it's not that virulent deadly, no? So I think these are key messages for us so that we don't panic when we see, the latest strain is like this and like that, no? Parang chill muna tayo, no? I think what we're learning from this is that, we have to understand if it's just really more infectious or talagang nakamamatay. And what we're seeing is, and Franco's the first one who introduced this on the webinar. Diba yung, what did you call it? Decoupling or uncoupling of the infectious? Decoupling. You were the first one who introduced it on the webinar. So I think, for the audience, we're kind of watching out for that. Okay, Raymond, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Go ahead, Raymond.
Okay, for the first question po, I'll post this to Dr. Ana. Pero tinatype niya rin yung kanyang kasagutan. Question coming in from Maria Rowella Lamak. Kung yung 2 boosters na po ay kumpleto na, kailangan pa rin po bang kumuha or magpatusok ng bivalent vaccine na kung kumuha man po dito sa Pilipinas?
So I'm referencing the US CDC recommendations kasi doon na nga naging available, no? Ito mga bivalent boosters sa kanilang population regardless of the number of previous boosters that you received. Pagka meron ka ng 2 months from the previous dose and you are 12 years old and above, you are advised to receive the bivalent boosters. Franco, do I understand it correctly?
Yes, CDC recommends at least 2 months. Although most of us, don't agree with that because in data it shows that the longer the duration, the better the efficacy. So actually, just my personal opinion, it should be at least 6 months para mas maganda yung. Because sometimes it abrogates the effect. So kung masyadong in duration is
kung masyadong dikit. Kung masyadong dikit yung bakuna.
And it also increases the side effects too. So remember, there's no maximum duration. Ang problema lang, baka it will, if the duration is too long, then it will wane in between. So
You'll
For
become
me,
susceptible.
6 months. Plus, ang problema kasi ng boosters is it's becoming like influenza. You know, influenza vaccine is only effective for 4 months. So you
Right.
have to time it, right? You have to time it. You cannot do it too early or too late. Kung too early, tapos yung epidemic came out late, it will not be effective. Ang problema, at least influenza in United States, it's easy kasi seasonal siya. So you can really time it, right? Or we'll know from surveillance kung it's coming in early. Okay, then do the vaccine earlier. Because I wanted to do the vaccine in November, pero nakita ko tumataas na yung rate sa Texas. I got the vaccine right away. So you can time it. Ang problema sa COVID is, you know, there's seasonality, but still in between you can still have, you know, outbreaks. So ang hirap i-time ng booster, you know, and you cannot do, you know, booster every 4 months, every 6 months. It's not practical.
Natatawa ako, Franco, kasi in the way back, I mean, a year ago or so, Raymond, we probably know people did this, na nabakunahan ng Sinovac. Pagdating nung Moderna, kahit na isang buwan pa lang, dalawa, bakuna na naman sila. Nagkaroon ng Pfizer, bakuna na naman sila, no? So, I think, you know, ano lang tayo, permis lang, no? Let's just chill a little bit. I think the new data, that's why I said it's a reassuring presentation na we have increased natural immunity. And although I think, you know, what Anna was saying, okay, pero we don't have enough coverage, no? And the targets are very low. So again, this is where you have a dissonance between the science and the system, you know? Parang meron talagang gap. Anyway, Raymond, one more question and then we have to go to our closing remarks soon.
Closing remarks, okay. For there are 2 remaining questions na lang po, no? So I'll just choose the one that's most upvoted from Relova Alvarez. Opinions regarding the recent recommendation for voluntary indoor masking. Is the Philippine population ready for this? Dr. Ana?
Ako marami akong angst dyan. Baka kailangan natin ng isa pang oras para pag-usapan ng nuances ng masking sa Pilipinas.
Uy, we're taking that up next week, Ana. Dapat kasama ka, oo.
That should be an interesting discussion. Siguro ang tatandaan natin, so I appreciate what Franco shared earlier, no, na sa US, hindi na nga nakamask, hindi na nila inire-recommend even in healthcare settings unless in highly infectious environments. Pero siguro, ang isang kailangan nating isipin is that yung engineering controls, no, in indoor settings in the US and in many developed countries are much more how would you put that? Much more strictly controlled, no, compared to us in the Philippines, no? So tanggalin mo yung mask, sigurado ka ba na yung paligid mo maganda ventilation? Siguro kung masasabi mo, yes, there's a very high probability na yung aking paligid, maganda ang circulation ng hangin, hindi nakakulob. Kung huminga ako, hindi ko malalanghap siguro yung COVID na ipinapasa ng ibang tao, di ka mo hindi mag-mask. Pero alam naman natin na ang regulation for indoor air quality sa atin sa Pilipinas, it's still in its infancy. And in fact, nagsubok nga talaga ng gusto na magkaroon ng mga safety seal and quality seal as part of the COVID mitigation measures na hanggang ngayon very challenging pa rin ma-implement. So sa ganung konteksto and also considering the fact na ang booster rate natin ay hindi pa ganoon kaganda, bakit naman natin tatanggalin yung isa pang layer ng proteksyon na hindi naman mahirap sundin at gamitin? So for me, I think the time is not yet here that we can say na very confident na tayo na pwedeng wala ng mask.
Yeah, I think I just had to chime in a little thing, no? Parang because I'm in the US and I can see now the difference really, no? Parang also here everybody has a car. I mean, parang when it comes to public transport and your exposure in small enclosed spaces, yun nga, in the developed countries, you have transport that's individual, no? Of course, there's public transport, but that's not the main mode of transport. Anyway, so Raymond, you had one more question. Go ahead.
One more question. Well, this has to do from Dr. Joseph Tortona. Can the COVID-19 mutate in animals as they do in humans? And do they, has there been any studies that they serve as carriers po of the virus? Dr. Franco, have you read anything along these lines?
So there are more than 32 mammals now that can be infected with COVID-19. Actually, in number of cases, cats are number 3 now, and dogs are number 4. Siyempre, mink number 1, tsaka white-tailed deer number 2. So, but we still don't have good evidence that they can transmit it to humans. Okay, we still don't have it. So they can be infected, and then, but we still don't have good evidence that they can transmit it back to humans. But that could happen in the future. Parang with influenza, right? Avian, pig. So that could happen in the future. And yeah, that could be the source too of new variants. So yeah, we have to, most important is surveillance. You have to do surveillance of the mammals. But yes, that's a possibility.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna give our speakers a minute or two to formulate their parting words for our audience, and we will do our evaluation.
poll.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Susie, and to Dr. Franco and Dr. Ana for answering our questions in the Q&A. So the 5 questions that we have are, as always, 4-point Likert scales po, no? 4-point Likert scale questions. First one, panelists demonstrated thorough knowledge of the topic. Number 2, panelists were well prepared and organized. Number 3, the panelists spoke clearly and audibly. Number 4, the panelists used appropriate language with technical medical jargons adequately explained. And finally, the panelists contributed to new perspectives and knowledge on managing various key health issues. We will not be closing this evaluation poll po, no? As we move on to the final 1-minute messages to the audience from our speakers. Dr. Susie?
Yeah, Anna, go ahead.
So maraming salamat ulit sa TVUP and sa Stop COVID Deaths team for this invitation to join you in this very interesting discussion. Siguro yung gusto ko lang ipaalala sa ating audience is in the context of these newly detected subvariants, we are still blessed by the fact that the vaccines continue to be effective. Siguro dapat isipin na natin na ang ating proteksyon ay hindi mabubuo kung hindi at least 3 dosis ang bitbit ng ating katawan. So hindi dapat natin iniisip na yung 3rd dose ay additional lang, kung hindi it's an essential part of our protection. And looking at our current rates, sana mas marami pa ang tumanggap ng 3rd dose para mas maging maayos, no, ang ating protection rates, not just for ourselves but also for our families and communities. The less chances there are of infecting each other, the more we can be confident of moving around, lalo na dito sa parating na holiday season where we know traditionally, no, nasa Pilipinas talaga nagkukumpul-kumpol ang ating mga kababayan. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, Anna. Franco?
Yeah, so I've just summarized my talk na yes, the Omicron subvariants are more infectious, but it not necessarily meaning more virulent. So second is yes, it has increased immune evasion, so there's a decreased protective efficacy of the COVID vaccines against symptomatic infections, but it still has great efficacy versus severe infection. So it's still ended because of the cellular immunity. And third, yes, the monoclonal antibodies are becoming useless, but the antivirals are still works well against the new Omicron subvariants. So yeah, there's some and another good news is it looks like it's becoming more predictable too. So it looks like we can forecast it. So in the future we can make a better booster, and hopefully it becomes seasonal. Hopefully it becomes seasonal, so it'll be easier to time the boosters.
Yeah, thank you, Franco. Thank you so much for both of you for your excellent presentations, and for for being with us today. And Franco, you can go to sleep now. I know it's late. Stay where you are. Maraming salamat. Thank you so much. So we're going to our brief summary with Deputy Director of the Philippine General Hospital, Stella Marie Legaspi Jose. Stel, o ikaw na.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to all of you. We have two very good speakers, excellent lecturers from Dr. Franco Felizarta. Sir Franco, buti hindi kayo nagsasawa to go host, to come here, to be with us in this webinar. He discussed the Omicron subvariants, the BQ.1.1, which is more common in Europe, and the XBB, which is more common in Asia. He noted the relation of the P spike mutations and the growth advantage. He said that the key spike, the more you have the P spike mutation, there is more growth advantage, and that makes the virus very transmissible. Now in the US, they were able to make a forecast that for January 2023, the more dominant subvariant will be the BQ.1 and the BQ.1.1. Now, what about the effect of the subvariants on the monoclonal antibodies? He said that the subvariants, the Omicron subvariants, are almost all useless with the Omicron subvariant. No? So the monoclonal antibodies do not have much effect. Now, as to the vaccines, BQ.1 and BQ.1.1 have a significant neutralizing evasion. Also, but he qualified that later on, and he said also that there is the decreased effect of the neutralizing antibodies. Now, the antivirals that we know of, for example, the molnupiravir and Paxlovid, still has efficacy against the Omicron subvariants. Now, the good thing about this is there is a protective efficacy against death. No, there's a dramatic decrease in death. No, unlike the Delta surge where we had a lot of deaths. No, in spite of the worldwide activity of the subvariant, there is a decrease in the number of deaths. So why is that? Because there is an increase in our cellular immunity. He mentioned that when you have the Moderna vaccine, 80% will prevent symptomatic situation. But when you have 2 doses, there's 82% protection. And if you have 3 doses and you have a previous infection, there is 100% protection against the Moderna subvariant has 100% protection against infection. What is the explanation for this? He said that the T cell response after a COVID vaccination is durable, no? And cellular immunity is still working. So the Omicron, the subvariant, mostly stays in the upper respiratory tract, no? And because the ACE receptors are there, so it makes it less virulent. Unlike the Delta variant, which went to the lower respiratory tract, thereby you have lung pneumonia, infection. And in the States, they already have the bivalent vaccine. Now, Dr. Anna Ong-Lim mentioned the daily number of COVID cases. There is still an upsurge in the middle of the year of this year due to the Omicron and the subvariants. Fortunately, the number of deaths, as we observe it here in the Philippines, is low. There is no evidence of more severe disease or illness or death. No? And she mentioned that in the Philippines, from October 15 to 17, interestingly, there are 61 cases of new cases of the Omicron subvariant, and October 18 have 8 active cases. Now, the Omicron XBC variant it's a variant under monitoring and investigation. Okay, the XBC, we have 193 cases. Now, are the current vaccines still effective? Still effective. The boosters are more effective when they resemble the circulating variant. Okay, so we have to keep that in mind. The booster vaccines add little extra protection unless the proper immunity, the population immunity is already high. Okay, so I think we have achieved that one. Effectiveness, so vaccine effectiveness, the vaccines protect us against severe disease, and the booster adds protection, especially against symptomatic infection with the original sequence of the variant. Okay, so in the Philippines, our vaccination status, 94% of the population are vaccinated, and these age 12 to 17 contributed to 112% of that number, and 18 to 59%, 109% from 10 to 59 years old. So what we're saying is we still lack people. We still need more people to be vaccinated, because the age group 12 to 17 and 18 to 19, they are the ones who have high vaccination rate. The older ones, the vaccination rate is still low. So the most important vaccine booster, she said, is the one that you got. So instead of waiting for the bivalent vaccine, why don't you get vaccinated now? So how do we protect ourselves? Interestingly, she mentioned the multiple layers improve success. No? So we have the Swiss cheese respiratory pandemic defense. No, we have to create layers of protection against the COVID-19. That is, number one, you wash your hands, stay home when you're sick, get tested, gather outside instead of staying indoors, and wear masks and get vaccinated. That's all for this webinar. Back to you, Susie.
Thank you very much, Stella, for that excellent summary. And next week, please join us. The topic is to mask or not to mask. Today pa lang pinag-usapan na natin, no? So we're gonna have Isa Alejandria, who's the president of the Philippine Society for Microbiology and Infectious Disease and director of the Institute of Clinical Epidemiology. Don't miss it. To mask or not to mask. Raymond.
Thank you, Dr. Susie, and thank you also to Deputy Director Stella Jose for that incredible synthesis po and closing remarks. Shown on the screen is the evaluation poll. So at least 93% of our attendees indicate that they strongly agree with all of the questions posed sa evaluation poll, and that is how very much very well received po itong pong ating webinar for today, especially with our great lineup of speakers. So sana po magkita-kita po tayo again next week po, no? But before we conclude our program, all Stop COVID Deaths webinars are archived for viewing at the TVUP YouTube channel. For your convenience, you just go to www.youtube.com/TVUPPH for you to be able to see all of those, including ito pong mga selected presentations po natin that we feature in its entirety. These are very short consumable videos that we lovingly call SCD Shorts. Doon din po ninyo sila makikita. At sana po, if you have the time, you'll be able to, well, watch them. Maybe if you're riding the train or the bus or commuting, kung ano man, or you're in your break, we hope you'll be able to gain the nuggets of wisdom from these short videos po. So that concludes our program for this week po, no? Magkita-kita po tayo again next Friday from 12 noon to 2 p.m. It's a date.
Together, we can stop COVID deaths.
So keep safe, keep healthy, and see you online.